Well, morning everyone to a nice cloudy day. So those of you on vacation, which isn't me, I hope this is like one of the worst days of your trips. You're inside all day. But thanks everyone for coming to Hong Kong. We really appreciate all of you. I think just a few comments. I know everything is everything's pretty hard right now. We've been used to that now for going on 18 months. And it's kind of been a struggle. And so I think, first of all, I hope, this is a chance for those of you who are in the United States to get out and breathe a little bit, because I know some of you kind of have it harder than some of us overseas, kind of relatively speaking to some extent, because USCIS, EOIR, and all of those things we won't talk about here, like the OIR, are getting they're where things are, in immigration court and everything else. So, I hope you enjoy your time, and thanks for coming. And I look forward to a great conference. I think, we really look forward to, the 2 days here, especially, and that trip to Guangzhou, the consulate. It's always been a place. It's not necessarily been the easiest post in our region to kind of sit down and talk with. It's not like some of the posts that we've historically gone to and had really great relationships with. So broaching that new post, getting a tour there, seeing the new, it's kind of a new consulate, which would be cool. One of those nice modern ones, as opposed to Chennai last year for space issues, and they just were scrambling with their old building setup. So so I hope all of you enjoy your 3 days if you're doing that as well. And look forward to the next 8 hours with y'all today. Bye.
Thank you. I'm Ron there. I'm the vice chair of Welcome to Hong Kong. I'm conscious of the fact that this is Jeremy's one of Jeremy's last public appearances as chair of our chapter. On behalf of the incoming team.
Like, am I going into a home or something?
Jeremy is well, we like to thank him very much for his spectacular leadership in the past couple of years. He has really laid a firm foundation for his chapter to move to the next stage. I'd like to thank him very much and wish him all the best in his future endeavors. Thank you. Thank everyone.
You want to talk for 15 minutes? So we're actually ahead of time, even though we started late. You want to say some more?
No.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's go. Well, I think out of courtesy to the people that may be joining us online, or that will be joining us online, and also those that may be showing up a few minutes later, to make sure they're here by the 8:45 start time, and maybe we should delay until 8:45. So I can talk for 15 minutes. So we're gonna have Jared talk. Well, let's do the obligatory. Good morning. My name is David Intrine. This is Jared Dion. Again, we are the code conference chairs, and we're also the day coordinators for today and tomorrow. Welcome to Hong Kong. I like to notice that we have a beautiful view in a good way. It's kind of rainy and dreary out, so we won't be tempted to go outside and enjoy and stare out at the beautiful view of Hong Kong. It is actually quite nice. So this conference is brought to you by the American Immigration Lawyers Association Bangkok District Chapter. Dedicated, thank you for the hard work of the committee team, who we'll recognize later. And also a special thanks to our sponsors and exhibitors, without whom we wouldn't be able to have such a nice venue and such a nice conference. I'd like to point out our conference patron. I recognize him. It's American Life Incorporated, and represented by Daryl Sanders. If I'm correct, it is the oldest regional center in the world, as far as the EB5 regional center groups. And again, thank you. we have a signature technology partner. It's CMB, perhaps the second oldest regional center in the business. And we have 3 exhibitors. We have Live in America group. They're not quite as old as the other 2, but they've been around for 4 or 5 years. I work with them, very good group. There's a table outside for them. Then we have First Pathway Partners. Once again, they've been in the business for quite some time, maybe 8 years or longer. And all of these groups are very successful as regional centers in the EV5 industry. So please make sure to stop by and visit them, because from my experience and talking with a lot of our chapter members, next week you might have a client in your office looking for an option for EV5, and it's fresh in your mind, and you met some of the great participants in the industry with a lot of experience, a track record, and you've got 4 potentials that you can refer to that have some sense of security and safety. Of course, we don't recommend that you refer anyone to any project as a legal practitioner, but you can make an introduction. Just make the introduction. And then the last exhibitor is actually a Granada CBI, Citizenship by Investment Program. They won't be here today, they will be here tomorrow. And it's a very interesting hot topic in U.S. immigration. If you haven't heard about it, we have a panel tomorrow that you may want to hear. It's obtaining Canadian citizenship and qualifying for E1, E2 status. There's only 2 countries in the world in which you can actually obtain citizenship by making an investment within 6 months and then qualifying you for an visa. So they will be here tomorrow and they'll be set up. So please note, our sponsors and exhibitors are not in any way endorsed by AILA or the AILA Baycott District Chapter or any conference speaker, discussion leader, including U.S. government speakers, of any company, its products, or services. So, we remind everyone to join us, everyone who's here and around the world. This is an interactive conference. We hope that after panels, there'll be a little bit of time after each panel to ask some questions. We do have people attending remotely, and of course, if they're in the U.S., they may fade away in the afternoon, but we also, if you're joining remotely, there's a chance for you to type some questions if you want to be involved, or even we can put you up on the screen. So if you're remote, there'll be that opportunity as well. Just remind everybody to please turn your phones off to vibration mode. If you need to take a call, please step out. This door is open for emergency exit, but please don't use it. Please pass through the back and outside. Clifton's a great facility, I think. We're very happy with it. They do ask that you can limit bringing food and drinks into the conference space. Cup of coffee, okay, I'm not going to say anything, but let's keep food. So at lunchtime, we will be having lunch back out in the space where the coffee and breakfast was. Say a few words.
Well, thank you. First, I want to apologize for all the emails that I've been sending in the past 8 weeks. So, just trying to promote this conference, and we're very proud of it. We couldn't do it without the whole team and your support, so we are very thankful that you're here today. Today is kind of our Consular Officers Day. So we are going to have actually 2 consular officers from Manila who will be joining us later today. We're going to have one, used to be 2, but 1 consular officer from Guangzhou who will also be joining us today. After the introductory panel, we will have the Consular General will be joining us from Hong Kong. So please behave yourself, okay? All right, and in order to build a good relationship with them and for them to come in the future, we need to ask questions, but we also need to be courteous and professional. This is not AILA National that you can just go up to the mic and dance, okay? So this is just more class than that. Okay, so but today is our Consular Officers Day, so just keep that in mind. This is completely on tape and being recorded, so just keep that in mind as well. Okay, tomorrow is kind of a no counselor day, so we will have other discussions tomorrow. And but I guess that's it. And you should have been asked already whether you will be joining us for dinner tonight. It's provided by the conference free of charge for all paying attendees. If you have not indicated, if you want to come to dinner and nobody has asked you, please let us know. We'll make sure that we have your name down. And oh yes, you can go up to the registration table as well.
To let us on the registration list, you'll tick your name that you're coming to dinner.
Great. And yeah, well, we will have announcements throughout the day, and I'll just enjoy. And I guess we are 5 minutes away from the first panel. Oh, also, I want to let you know that there are still high school students around, and you will see them around there. Casey, where's Casey? Casey is our local guy. He has arranged some students, assistants or intern or helper, I don't know what to call them, but they're here to help us. So they are here to help us. If you have local questions, you can ask them. And tomorrow I want to thank Fred. The counselor visits for Guangzhou cannot possibly happen without Fred's connection. So big shout out.
One more thing. So we sent out an email about a lot of information on Hong Kong. One of them was a suggestion that you join, or you download an app called WeChat. It's an app that is developed out of mainland China, and every once in a while they do something better than we do. And creating this app is very robust, many functions. We created a group. If you have downloaded that app and you haven't joined the group, all you have to do is open up, tap on contacts, tap on add people, and it opens up a scan QR code. You can point it at the screen and scan this, and you'll be added to the group. Anybody want to try that right now?
Does it work?
Yeah, that should work. So we'll leave that there for a moment. It's going to be you want to go through all of the no, they're not. But just so you know, the consular officers that will be joining us are from, as Gary mentioned, the Guangzhou IB chief will be here. The Hong Kong
Consul General.
Consul General. Okay, Consul General, Manila Consul General,
And IB chief.
IB chief, and Ho Chi Minh City. Remotely, we'll have Mr. Hillen, who is the
IB chief.
IB chief. Thanks, Mike. Yeah. So, we had a few late cancellations in the last week or so. Of course, we're disappointed for that, but we're happy that those gentlemen will be able to join us.
Right. I think in this climate, to have any consular participation, I give all the credits to the consulate to kind of venture out, to reach out to us. So any participation that they can give us, we really do appreciate. So be nice to them.
Yeah, right.
In terms of the written materials, we want to go paperless. So we will send you links to those written materials, either in our Google documents. You can download that. You can just look at your Google Docs, or maybe put on WeChat. But you will get an email with all the links to our written materials. Just Sean. Where's Sean?
Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Sean, join the group. Yeah, we got Alex. So. All right, and if you're having trouble, we've noticed that some of you are having trouble getting registered as a WeChat user. We might be able to help you. It seems that you need verification from someone who's already used it. So just come up to us later on individually. And we'll be using this for some announcements and sharing some information. I noticed that a few people are already posting some hot news developments with the group. We do want to keep it mainly to conference information, at least during the conference. After the conference, we want to continue on as just a show with PVC members. Then we can continue to do so. Questions?
Questions, okay?
The question.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering, what is the story with CLE? I don't think I've ever provided a part number.
Oh, CL, there's been if you need special application for CLE, then let us know. An application was sent to several states.
Okay.
Every state has a very different system, so we just need a case-by-case basis. There is a certificate. For example, some you just fill out a certificate and they trust you.
Like Connecticut, for example, that's good enough for me.
Oh, good.
Well, we want to invite the next panel.
Yes, let's go. It's
Let's go time.
It's 2 o'clock, so there are 2 minutes difference. So.
Oh. Don't throw away your feedback form because I just in the past like a few hours, a lot of people ask me, hey, where are we going next week? I mean next year, and a lot of it depends on your feedback. So if you want to go Bangkok, Vienna, Seoul, Korea, just write down your feedback. No promises, but we want to get an idea of where you guys want to go next year. Thank you. Okay, we're about ready to start. This is our opening panel. Hot news and updates. And we'll ask Jeremy to introduce this panel when we start. But please silence your cell phones. And like David said, if you have to answer your phone, please go outside. And David has been all the announcements already. So, okay. Okay. Okay.
All right, I think I'm good.
You guys go?
Yeah, I'm good. I got my now. That'd be great.
All right, there we go. So, welcome to our opening panel, which is, kind of hot topics panel, and we thought that's a good place to start, because hot topics is always kind of a good overview of, sort of everything going on, a little bit of updates, and hot stuff and regional issues. So I'm DLing a little bit and also presenting. So to my left and your right, that's David Interline from Taipei, Taiwan. David Fred Hong is from Guangzhou, China. And James Austin, if I couldn't remember his name. James is Jim. He's from Kansas City, Missouri or Kansas? Missouri, the Missouri side, the better side, as a former Missouri resident myself. So I want to thank them all for coming. Thanks for putting up with, what is kind of a, interesting panel, because it's kind of a, combination of a bunch of different kind of things, and they're a little disjointed. But, the first thing we want to start off with, of course, because this is a consular processing panel, right? We're dealing with consular work. I kind of wanted to go through some of, really more of the hot topics in the consular world, and, of course, the Foreign Affairs Manual. As we all know, the FAM, I've never called it the Foreign Affairs Manual besides that one time, because it's just too long. So I kind of wanted to start with that. And what I wanted to start with was walking through kind of how I've viewed the last sort of 18 months, that is, the horror show. And it's not all bad, but it's I will, there's been some changes to the FAM that I've liked, probably not related to the horror show, but I want to start. I kind of want to work through how the executive orders and actions sort of have rippled through to consular practice, because I think they've signed all these executive actions. We've looked at them. We've gotten angry.
And I think some, kind of overtly trickle into the FAM. There's a lot of, we're changing this because of this. Especially related to BAHA, which is an acronym immigration lawyers are now using, which the consulates generally have been confused about, but Buy America, Hire America, that's one of them, and then some are trickling in, just a little bit more, subtly, I guess, especially around changes to vetting, related to the really long titled implementing immediate heightened screening and vetting of applications, blah, 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 for visas and other immigration benefits. So according to that executive order, I think a lot of those changes are much more subtle, going to be rolled out over a longer period of time, possibly. And it's just going to mean that everything at the consulate, never usually gets easier, but it is definitely not going to get any easier, I would think, in many areas. So I wanted to start there. I wanted to, and of course the travel ban, I wanted to mention that just briefly as one of the other executive actions out there. As, to some extent that doesn't, I didn't want to cover it, one, because I don't think anybody in our panel really deals with the travel ban too much. And two, it's not as pressing in Asia Pacific as it is in other areas, EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa chapter, that's definitely a concern in their neck of the woods. Less of a concern in our neck of the woods. But so we're not going to cover that one, but I definitely want to cover the vetting and BAHA. So I think the first one I really want to lead out with related to the March 6th implementing, immediate heightened screening and vetting of visas and other immigration benefits. That one is I want to talk about, public charge and affidavit of support changes in the FAM. Because I think that's one of those areas that is people have already talked about related to the FAM changes, but we all know out there since February there's been leaks that there's going to be some DHS, USCIS rulemaking, related to the affidavit of support and public charge. There's been some leaks of some text that's out there, and that's really hard to cover at CLE because none of it's really official. There's not been, a notice and comment rulemaking yet done and issued out there, so we can really comment on the text of it. But, we all know in the background, likely there's something going to be there. And what it is, if it's based on the text that's out there, there's a 240-something page release that I haven't waded all the way through yet. But, it's really one of those areas where you can really ratchet down on public charge. So I did want to cover those FAM changes, and public charge, it's a holistic, I think the first thing we got to realize, we got to go back to the INA, because in the consular world, we were kind of, especially related to immigrant visas, we were just so used to the affidavit of support somewhat being the end-all, be-all on IVs that needed affidavits of support. And I think, that's not entirely how the text of the INA plays out. So I think, fair or unfair, the FAM changes really go back to that INA and really kind of flesh it out, a bit more, in the public charge. And that's, of course, INA 212A4, 212A grounds of inadmissibility for public charge. I think, so I'd like to start there, really with looking at it because, the INA clarifies like all of the factors, that should be looked at when adjudicating public charge. At minimum, age, health, family status, asset, resources, and financial status, and education and skills. So that's a pretty holistic review of someone's situation. And of course has the catch-all in addition section where, they can kind of determine that any other, really relevant factors, can be considered, including affidavit of support. So I think the FAM changes, which we'll get into in a second, so I can give you that site and everything else, that really goes back to the text of the INA. But where that goes from here, of course, that's the bigger question, because of course, I kind of want to go to the 1999 INS guidance that was done after IRA court, sort of, in 64 Fed Register 28689. That was from May 1999, before my time practicing, but been around there. And that was really kind of where, this sort of, kind of totality of the circumstances, really approach was defined, and how affidavit of supports would work, and the public charge considerations, how that was really defined for how we viewed it for quite some time. And so, if there is any changes to DHS, through USCIS, to what they do with it, it may really change that sort of foundational way we look at public charge. So and I really kind of want to compare, the FAM. So the FAM was, the FAM site is 302.8-2B. And in January 2018, that's why it's on Hot Topics, they really changed that, definition. Before, and I didn't do a PowerPoint, so I'll just read it. Before, an alien who must have an I-864 will generally not need to have extensive personal resources available unless considerations of age, health, skill, etc. suggest the likelihood of his or her becoming self-supporting is marginal at best. So it really kind of, started with the affidavit of support and immigrant visas, and then worked to those other factors listed in the INA. Whereas now, the new 302.8-2B, in the new FAM guidance, is that in every case, I find it interesting, you must consider at minimum the applicant's age, family status, assets, research, financial status, education, and skill. These factors, and any other reasonable factor considered relevant by an officer in a specific case, will make up the totality of circumstances. So they're really going to, I know we want to get outraged by things like this because there's change, and we don't like change to some extent. It creates uncertainty, but it's really going back to the text of regulations and the INA. So I think that's really important to remember. And then, the last sort of thing, number 3, goes the value of the affidavit of support. A properly filed non-fraudulent I-864 in those cases where it's required is a positive factor in the totality of circumstances. And the applicant must still meet INA 212A4. So it really is kind of reversing the paradigm and the structure of the way a consular officer was adjudicating public charge. It's really going textually to where the statute is, and of course, because that change really is made, in relationship to, the presidential memo, it's probably going to lead to, some different looks at public charge, and how that all plays out. I think, it's too new to know, and it will be possibly post-specific or regional specific, how strict these things get, as it always is at consular sections. But I think, that's, a really interesting update as we look to the possibility of significant change in the affidavit of support, public charge in the next year, and I know, there's going to be some opposition in that area, when, a notice and comment rulemaking is made, and I would encourage all of you to write comments, and a lot of people are going to get involved in that discussion. But I think this is one of those prelude areas. In the DOS Spring Liaison 2018, that's AILA doc number 180413330. The State Department really says that this goes back to that presidential memo on immediate heightened screening and vetting, and reflects, a different, a more textual interpretation of the INA. So I think that's one of those changes that to me is going to be very important, you know, especially in the IV and family. We'll see how it plays out in NIV. You know, just how that public charge consideration, how that looks, and probably that's very post specific and very visa type specific. We've seen more public charge determinations, but you know, in NIV, if you know, they can 214B it for, you know, immigrant intent, they're going to do that instead of 212A4 in it. So, you know, it's in the fam. So, you know, maybe it won't get as much, but in the IV, I'm very interested to see where that goes. So I think the next thing, and I kind of want to continue in that memo. The next thing of interest, you know, that I think is of interest is continuing on with, you know, sort of revocations, you know, admin processing delays and those sorts of things. And I think, you know, that's been a hot topic for quite a few years now, and it continues to really be so. You know, and I want to start with revocations, you know, because, you know, I remember when they dropped the DUI revocation in 2016, we were all, you know, that's very specific. If you get arrested for a DUI, even or convicted, you know, expect a revocation, whether that's consular revocation or it's prudential revocation by the Department of State. You know, that's going to happen. But I think the revocations, you know, it's going to get a bit more intense, especially in that criminal area. And as someone who I practice in Australia, in Sydney, but I practice all over Australia, for those of you who don't know, and in a country where I guess people are honest, and more extent than maybe many other places, but also, you know, spend significant time in the US. DUIs are a huge problem in Australia. They may get them in the United States a little bit. They may also commit some crimes in the United States. So this area becomes more interesting to me because I have a heavy E3 practice. So I have lots of people there on, you know, who knows how long E3 stints of 2 years each. You know, so I think, you know, this is an area of kind of concern, and probably should be a concern for everybody, because prudential revocations, of course, you know, our consular revocation, they're really kind of hand in by what the consular officers themselves do a revocation for, right? You know, that's only 214B, an IV visa issuance, physical removal of the visa, or you know, the watch list promoted hits for DUI. So that's the DUI one. You know, those are the consular revocations, whereas prudential revocations is the department can revoke ineligibility or lack of entitlement, even if it's suspected or for virtually any other reason, so says the FAM under 9 FAM 403.11-5B. And also that's, you know, kind of goes and, you know, plays off, of course, the CFR, 22 CFR 41.122, you know, where where the CFR looks at revocations and that issue. So, you know, I want to go back to the DOS Spring Liaison, because this is, of course, hot topic, so that just got posted a couple weeks ago. You know, and they said in one of their answers, as a matter of long-standing policy, the department prudentially revokes a visa when it receives information that a visa holder has been arrested for any crime, including domestic violence, because the question itself related to, you know, there's been a lot of reports of people getting arrested for domestic violence issues and then having a prudential revocation. And that may result in visa ineligibility. So my guess is, you know, based upon that, we should be expecting prudential revocations for almost any arrest these days. You know, and if that's, you know, we've been seeing that a little bit, but if that's what they're going to continue to do, you know, we really need to be careful with our U.S. clients, because, you know, once, you know, prudential revocation, of course, goes back to that, yeah, you can stay for the validity of your status, but once you leave, you're not going to be able to use that visa reenter, of course. So, you know, I think advising clients appropriately that are arrested in the United States, because, you know, they may have an arrest and then, like, you know, be granted bail, be able to leave because it's something minor where, you know, they don't have really any reason they can't leave. And then, you know, what if they need to go back? What if they need to deal with those criminal charges later? And that's a concern because, you know, sometimes it can be hard to get them back in at a consular level and they need a new visa. So, you know, so I think, that's a very, interesting area. I also think, just admin processing, we continue to see a lot of it, and I think, continue in this area where, you can see a lot more 2.1Gs for different issues. And then also I think the other sort of delays, the admin processing after interview, where there's, usually a DHS hit after interview, where, the consulate, you go to interview, the consulate says everything's hunky-dory, and then, you don't get your visa back. And then, you as the attorney make an inquiry and figure out what's going on, and, we're still working on it, and then you kind of can get the idea that something came up after interview, because of course, it's some of the security, related, tasks in the visa function happen kind of after interview. So if there's a DHS hit after interview, my understanding of it is it pretty much blocks the consular from being able to just, issue the visa until that issue is dealt with and reviewed. And a lot of times, a properly done visa application, I've been seeing them a lot with my Australian clients with CBP issues. It's like every single one that may already been disclosed. And Sydney's been kind enough in some cases to even annotate the visa once it's issued for CBP to say, oh, that issue was looked at, which is kind of nice. I wish more folks would do that. So I think that's an interesting area, and probably just under the extreme vetting, we're going to just continue to see more of them. The last area I really want to cover relates to Baja. As we know, Buy America, Hire America, for those of us who do, significant business work, and Jim's going to talk about it a little bit in the H-1B context and, the petition-based context, but, it's really permeating kind of business practice, especially in, practice like mine, where we do a lot of different types of E's, because we have 3 types of E's in Australia, E1, E2s, the traditional treaty-based, visas, and we also have E3s for Australian specialized workers. So I think Baja is one of those interesting areas in E's. Because when the FAM was revised after Baja, they kind of gave some guidance to consular officers I find very interesting, about how they're kind of supposed to, balance the protective, that's 9 FAM 402.9-2, they're supposed to balance those protective interests of U.S. workers, based upon Baja, because that's what Baja says is, you need to hire Americans, right? Where possible. And so it really is a balance, between that administrative priority and the idea that all these E's, they're treaty-based visas, right? Which means, they're about giving our allies and our friends and, sometimes maybe not our allies and friends anymore, but they're about giving certain countries, kind of preferential ways to open businesses and bring certain employees into the United States, whether that's, a trader, or more likely, E2 as an investor. It's about creating kind of privilege and creating good relationships. It isn't just about, adjudicating a visa class. There is kind of a broader construct to e-visas. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic when you have really kind of 2 almost opposing policy priorities in a visa category. And I think, the E's are a really special example because, of course, the L's, the P's, the O's, all of those really, you don't have that diplomacy dynamic. Whereas, in the E's, you have much broader goals. And of course, consular officers, they're not just there to adjudicate visas. They are there to be diplomatics and create relationships with that home state, even if they're, consular tracked or, in the consular section for their year. So I really find that tension interesting. And I think we don't know how that's inevitably going to play out over the long term, while that executive order is enforced. But I think in the immediate term, one example I think we were already seeing tangibly of how Baja is, kind of silently infiltrated the fam. I think in this one particularly, because, look, I've been on liaisons recently in Sydney and in New Zealand, because, we've been trying to go to the Pacific part of the chapter a little bit this year. And they're all just like, what, we don't really look at it, but, or consider it law. But I really don't necessarily think, that's necessarily the case. And the FAM is definitely reorganizing priorities a little bit. I think one area, of course, we've seen that as essential employees, E2, E1 essential employees, it's 9FAM 402.9-7C. In March, April, there was, I forget which exact update the E's were in, but March, April this year, they rewrote as the annual FAM update, right? So the FAM just get updated kind of in a big chunk yearly and then gets trickled out now that it's electronic over the whole course of the year. But they changed, some of the essential employee stuff to really reflect what people are seeing with the employees, essential employees, that they're really going to make sure that, in the essential employees, they didn't, you couldn't hire somebody else in America, right? That's some of what they may be looking at. So I think that's really, going to be interesting, because they divided up kind of up into like a set, specialized skill employees, where they're looking at like a variety of factors, including specifically the availability of U.S. workers with such skill. That's noted in the FAM, and the salary. And so factors where, to some extent, it's kind of like labor market testing without being labor market testing, with no perm or, LCA involved. You can't do it, of course. And of course, E's, one of the essential components of the E, it kind of says so in the FAM, is the complete, exercise of great amounts of judgment and discretion in the adjudications. So I'm really interested. Wow, that was right. I'm really interested to see, good morning, how that kind of plays out. And then with the ordinary skilled workers, they said almost always they're for startup or training purposes for a short period of time. So, what does that mean as we advise our E-clients when they want to bring over employees? So I think, it's going to be limited. And I always think this is interesting because I practice in two very different areas, right? So before I moved to Sydney, I was in Thailand, and I did quite a bit of E's. I think for E's, for employees and like my chefs and things like that when I was in Thailand, because of course, in Thailand, Thai restaurants, like ubiquitous, you got to try to convince them to do something else. With an E a lot of times. It's just, we always kind of saw that. They were always pretty tough on some of those essential employees, like chefs. But now this is like more permeating to where like places where I am now, like Australia, where, your E-clients are, much larger companies that are, bringing a branch to the United States, and E-freeze may not be appropriate for some of their workers. So I think that's very interesting. And then, so I also note a couple more FAM changes on E's, just I thought was interesting looking at the updates. Source of funds, it's specific in 9FAM 402.9-6B. It says, no, inheritance of the business itself does not constitute an investment, which I found very interesting. And that was one of the newer sections, I believe, because it was in italics, which is always usually means it's a new addition. And, just some changes to substantial investment related to the commitment of the investor. That's 9FAM 402.96D. You may, this is new language, I think, in the FAM that I don't see as much. You may request whatever documentation is needed. This is new sort of any paperwork you want to properly assess the nature and extent of commitment to a business venture. Such evidence may include letters from chambers of commerce or statistics from trade associations, but unverified and unaudited financial statements based exclusively on information supplied by the applicant normally are insufficient to establish the nature and status of the enterprise. That's a bunch of garbly gook. So saying, certain internal company documents can't establish evidence. I think that's a little harsh. But I found those two changes of some interest. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some USCIS updates real quick. So Jen, why don't you give us a recap of H's and CSPA and a few other USCIS things. Oh. God, so boring.
So, well, not updates. So, just a quick recap, as you all know, some of you kind of look like you've been through the H-1B wars in early April, and for all those filings. Just to get you where we are in the last, this is May 9th now, it's a month after the cap rush. All the master's cap cases, as far as we know, have been received, went out in the last week and a half. Now we're starting to see these are just reports that we're receiving. Immigration is talking to us a lot right now. The regular cap cases, seeing checks cashed now. Nobody's getting rejections yet, as far as I know. We're seeing regular cap cases, checks cashed. Some receipts have gone out. And this week, I think they reported someone seeing the first RFE for a cap case. So it's nice to know that they're fast with the RFEs. We don't have the receipts yet, we got the RFEs. just one that I've heard of, and it's been reported, and I think that was, you don't want to make a guess on what's going to happen based on one RFE, but once again, apparently it was for a level 1 wage, saying it's not a specialty occupation. So we shouldn't project that into saying that this is going to be just like last year, but that certainly is an unpleasant start. So that's where we are with the H-1B right now with caps. Have anything else you want to stop there?
Yeah, let's do CSBA, because you have some interesting
Got a couple little quick tips on Child Status Protection Act. This is always difficult to discuss. Anytime you start talking dates for filing and final action dates and sought to acquire a CPA, it always turns into a grammatical nightmare. And so trying to properly explain it, there's been a couple issues with CSBA. You have to, for the derivative applicants, you have to show that you have sought to acquire within 1 year of visa availability. That's what the statute says. So the issue is really going to be, what about these cases that we are doing sought to acquire prior to visa availability? Statute is a little funny. Statute will reference the after visa availability. And there's never been a direct answer to that. And this is becoming even more important now as we're seeing the National Visa Center occasionally starting the documentation process more than a year before visa availability. So, will something that you sought to acquire a year and a half before visa availability count as sought to acquire within 1 year of visa availability? It gets stranger. The National Visa Center in Liaison did answer this question positively that says, yes, these actions taken prior to visa availability, they do consider that as sought to acquire under the Act. And from what we see, almost in the way that it's been working with National Visa Center and also through National Benefits Center, who does the stateside adjustment and these issues, it's almost as if the government is taking sought to acquire within 1 year after or any time before. So it's been very generous in the way that we're seeing these cases looked at, even though it's not official except the National Visa Center one time. So that's an interesting thing on sought to acquire. So that's a positive thing, because it was more restricted. Remember when it first came out in the FAM, there were only 3 ways to sought to acquire. Now it's slowly expanding, so it's getting better. The other issue with CSVA and sought to acquire is for stateside practitioners doing adjustment of statuses. For family-based cases, you have the bifurcated visa bulletin. You have the file by date, or dates for filing date, and the final action date charts. And you will see people that are derivatives that are assuming that they're going to be CSPA age saved by filing their application before the dates for filing, or I'm sorry, before final action date is correct. And this is, we're doing this with a lot of adjustment cases. You're filing using dates for filing, but you do not do the CSPA age calculation until the priority date is current. So those people who are filing adjustments for derivatives before the priority date's current, they're filing using that dates for filing. If they're not CSPA protected by the time their priority date becomes current, then they, in most cases, have wasted their money because they are not protected by CSPA. They're just guessing that when the priority date later becomes current, that their CSPA age is going to be under 21. Sometimes it's not, and that's creating some problems with people filing with the National Benefit Center and the case later being denied because they're not protected. The lucky ones in those cases are people that are filing early, that are filing as a direct beneficiary and family basis, second preference B, the child of a permanent resident, or 2A, the child of a permanent resident. If they filed early and then when the filing date becomes current, they found out that they had aged out, they were no longer CSPA protected. So far, the National Benefit Center is holding that case, and they've been holding this case for many years. They're treating that as if the old retrogression rules. They filed properly when they were allowed to file, but then the category of the priority date changed. And so they're holding that, so for many years, those cases will still keep getting work cards until that priority date in the 2B category becomes firm.
Yeah, Jim, do you want to talk about, secure document delivery real quick? Just for fun. No?
Yeah, but
It's a good idea. It's a good because it affects both people in the States and the consular practice because after your ID interview, you want your green card in the mail. So
yeah, this is just a good heads up. Those of you that know, the government announced a new policy a few weeks ago, a week ago, that they're going to start using secure document delivery, which requires special signatures. It's a special program of the Postal Service. There was a teleconference on it on the 3rd. I didn't get to do it because I was traveling. There are a lot of questions raised by this. This requires that the person directly, that is the person named on the document on the address has to sign and show ID to receive that secure document. This is mainly going to be for green cards and work cards. But this is another program by immigration where they never considered how this affects attorneys. I mean, for individuals, it's going to be bad enough. But for attorneys, how do we do that? It's direct to our address and the client's name. There's no one there to sign for it. And these are going to be a problem. And in some places, I know in our office, my friend does a lot of view adjustments. And we will, and not just you, but we'll get, for small office, we'll get 6 to 12 work cards or green cards a week. And sometimes they're addressed to us, sometimes to the individual client. And all the views go to the attorneys. So all those documents come to us. We do not ask for documents to be sent to us. In normal case, we want to send to the client. We want to be out of there. How are we going to sign for that? There's a form that they said that you can sign, the applicant can sign to designate a person. But this is tricky because the applicant has to ID to do that. It's a one-time thing. It has to be submitted to the post office to authorize someone else to get it. It's really going to be quite a nightmare. We don't know where this is going to end up. It just started May 29th, and they're starting the program just on documents that have been returned as undeliverable. So this week, probably, I don't know, what is it, stateside, Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll see, the attorney's just going to see the first ones of those delivered to them for documents that were returned plus. And then we don't know when they're going to start with all green cards and work cards, but hopefully there'll be some more information, so just kind of stay tuned to see how we're going to be able to get these documents.
yeah, and thank you. And the last sort of USCIS update, and I'll cover this one briefly, is just the new policy memo on sibling cases on DNA. So I think this is good news, really. I was talking to some of you today and yesterday about it, but I don't do a lot of cases anymore that require DNA testing. But I think this is good news because it kind of opens up the sibling relationship for DNA testing and 90% probability, based upon that testing. And I'm not a science person, so whatever they do with DNA testing, I match it all up. But if it's 90% or better match, then that's going to be really, really good evidence that those people are siblings. So if it's between 9 and 90%, it's some evidence, it's probative of some sort or not. And if it's less than 90%, well, that's probably bad news. So that policy memo is PM 602-01 06 and called DNA Evidence of Sibling Relationships. So that came out as a policy memo, I think 5 days ago. So I think for those of you who do preference family cases and do some F4s, that's going to be really helpful, especially in this area of the world where, this is one of those areas where I think, that is going to, be a helpful situation where, now DNA testing might be the evidence you need to help your siblings finally get reunited after a bazillion years, not living in the same country, especially if they're in certain countries. Yeah, and then it's the step sibling stuff. So I think, and it said, specifically in the kind of news alert that USCIS policy on parent testing remains unchanged. So that's based upon, that prior guidance in that area. So I think, I saw that pop up, and if everybody isn't registered for USCIS updates, please do. You get the nice daily updates from USCIS about everything they're releasing. It's really quite helpful. So that came up a few days ago, and I wanted to add it to this panel as I was kind of putting it together. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to David. David's going to give us a little updates on some, EB, employment based and EB5 related.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm going to use some slides so you don't have to listen to me. Yeah, I'm going to come. I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to. You can all interpret it as you wish. Now I'm going to talk about some hot topics in the region in the EB categories. So if I can find my slides. All right, I'm going to start with EB1 category. Those of you that practice. No, I got to get the PowerPoint up, but it's not. I need to get this full screen. All right, I'll go ahead and scroll. So just something I want to point out, if you practice in the EB categories and have the Chinese clients, then you probably would recognize this. But those that don't may not have noticed. This is a chart that shows the past 3 fiscal years. The EB1 category for China and India goes current. It started going current in 2016. Usually by the end of the fiscal year, there would be a priority date listed. And in 2016, it started in August, September. But then if you look at 2017, it's okay. So then you look at 2017, they set a priority date in June. And in 2018, it's in April. So this is indicating higher and higher demand, specifically, I believe, out of China for the EB1 category. So as you can predict for the next fiscal year, it's probably going to be set even earlier. My guess is much earlier, maybe in December or November, because we're seeing increased demand in the other categories because of the EB5 situation for Chinese petitioners. So as everybody should know, there's a per country cap. Of course, every country is going to get their percentage, but that's not really that many per country. So if you're involved in assisting Chinese investors in the EB1 categories, you can expect these just to have longer and longer delays for a whole. Next thing I want to talk about is I want to share some information about the EB3 situation.